Wednesdays with the RotoWire guys.
Oh, cool, man. We'll have to check that out. What is the time of that broadcast on XM then on Wednesdays?
Yeah, the World Championship of Fantasy Football segment is usually right around, I guess, 12:30 Eastern Time each Wednesday.
Around 12:30 Eastern Time. I noticed a spot that they were playing was Ashton Kutcher. It sounded like either he was hosting a radio show, but you're seeing a growing number of more and more, quote, celebrities come into the fantasy football world or the fantasy baseball world that are playing for these high-stakes challenges, just like you said, with all those poker players. And, poker players are always going to gravitate towards anything they can gamble on, especially if it's going to be like sports or poker-related.
Well, they're all looking for action. They have the ego, if you will, to think they know everything about everything, and they're a great bunch of guys too. They're just everyday people that have been able to achieve success in something they love to do, and they have so much passion for life. They're a lot of fun to be around, and we enjoy having those guys as part of our contest. Last year we had Montel Jordan, the R&B artist, and Gary Payton, Evander Holyfield. They were all drafting as part of the main event. But really the story is about the high-stakes fantasy football player. It's always fun to be around those celebrities, but it's more fun to beat those guys out of their money.
Because they got a lot of it you want to beat them out of. Well, that's cool. You've added a couple, in the recent years, you've also added a couple of other leagues. You've added some keeper leagues and the ladies event. What type of, I can't understand how a keeper league would work under the WCOF format. Is there a time commitment that you're committed to playing? Is it just 1 year, and if your keeper ends up being your team ends up being terrible, then you can just like walk away, or how are you managing the keeper leagues under the WCOF?
Well, this keeper league format it's of course new to us, and what we found is we have such a loyal and diehard audience of players. As you mentioned earlier in the show, it's so much about the social community. It's so much about being around the people that you get the chance to see maybe once or twice a season. And so the keeper league is a way for us to kind of create some synergy from year to year, because we are getting so many new people now playing in the World Championship of Fantasy Football. It's nice to have a format like this where you can keep guys together. So we don't expect to see much turnover in this format. Absent somebody dying, we're not going to probably have much turnover because these guys are here year in and year out.
Yeah, that was one of the things when I first started drafting the WCOF. I was expecting that, my league, on draft day, you're all there together, and your buddies. You're like, you go over there and you meet all the teams that are drafting everything. I kind of figured that those relationships established through the teams that I drafted with in those years would have been like longer lasting relationships, but it just never really worked out that way, which was a little bit disappointing to me. But it's also what you make out of it too. I mean, you could always put more effort into that. But it'd be great if there was a way to maybe get more involvement with the players in the leagues, and certainly a keeper format is going to definitely facilitate that type of social behavior.
Well, you're exactly right. And the competition is so fierce as well. These guys want to beat you, and you want to beat them, and while they are oftentimes willing to share some information, you got to question really how legit is that information, because they're looking for an edge. I mean, they're looking to win $300,000 first and foremost. They want to win that league championship. They want to earn those coveted world rankings points to get that designation as the best player in the world, like John Rozak did this year. So while they're all about building the relationships and friendships, first and foremost, man, it's all about winning that league.
It's just like being friendly at the poker table. Hey, Dustin, we got to take a break from mine and Robbie's Ugly Mugs and bring on a beautiful girl here to tell us what the weather's going to be like at all the WCOF drafting spots. So we're going to take about 3 minutes off to see her, and we'll be right back with you to talk about the World Championships of Fantasy Football main event.
Thanks, guys. Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Fantasy Sports Review Weather Center. I'm Amanda Walker, and it's great to be back here with all of you after a 4-year vacation down at the University of Alabama. I got a degree in broadcast journalism, saw the football team win a national championship last year, and had a lot of fun doing so. So with that, as ready as you are to start the NFL season, I think we are ready to get started with this week's weather. This weekend in Washington, D.C., we should have a pretty good weekend for the most part. Temperatures will get up ever so close to 90, but it will not be anything like the Dante Inferno-like temperatures we've had for most of the summer. And be ready for a possible thunder shower to round out the end of the weekend. Since we are featuring the World Championship of Fantasy Football this week, we may as well check out all the weather in the cities you can draft in, so you can get a good idea of how the weather will be when you show up there to draft your team. This year's cities are Sin City, Las Vegas. Here on the East Coast, we have the Atlantic City if you want something where your wife and kids can go out and play while you draft away. You can go to Orlando if you are in the middle of the country. you can go to draft in the Windy City, Chicago. Let's start the WCOF weather report off with Sin City, Las Vegas. No matter what you are out there for, if it's summertime, you know it will be hot, so make sure you stay cooled off at the Moray Club in Mandalay or Bear at the Mirage. The weather in the middle of August is going to be close to the mid-hundreds, so you'll want to stay cool in that pool early and often, and make sure to tip your pool host as well. Now, let's fly back over to the East Coast and see the weather at the Atlantic City draft location will be like. It can get hot in August and September, but with some luck, this August and September, you'll get to see some really good beach weather with lots of sun and temperatures staying in the high 70s and low 80s. Heading south to Orlando, Phil's WCOF draft site of choice. In the summer, leading to fall months, you can get some pretty warm weather, and still with the temperatures in the high 80s, there will be almost always an afternoon thunderstorm that comes through around 4 p.m. and cools things off. Of course, you always have to be on the lookout for an occasional hurricane, such as a few years back when Phil was drafting down there. Our last WCOF site of the summer will take us to the Windy City in Chicago. Same place Phil will be running a marathon in Chicago this year. Some pretty good weather will be waiting for you when you arrive to draft this year, as the temperatures on draft day should be in the comfortable 80s. So enjoy yourself there and try to grab dinner at Alina if you can. Now it's time to take a minute to thank Kevin Greavy and Greavy's Sports Bar Restaurant here in Fairfax. Greavy's is the home to the best sports bars in all of Northern Virginia and should play host to your sports viewing needs. Greavy's is the best place to catch all this season's NFL action. Heck, you should just even consider holding your fantasy draft there. Greavy's is conveniently located at the corner of Gallows Road and Route 50 in Fairfax. Please stop by Greavy's and tell them that Fantasy Sports Reviews crew sent you. That will do it for this week's weather report. Thanks again for tuning in to see me. It's been a lot of fun coming back to the Weather Center, and I hope you haven't seen the last of me. Let's see what the guys can see, what they can work out with my agent. Anyways, signing off from Fantasy Sports Review Weather Center, I'm Amanda Walker. Now back to you guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, Amanda, for coming back to the studio, doing the weather for us. It's great to see you again. Congratulations on graduating from Alabama. So now you guys know what the weather's going to be like in Vegas, Atlantic City, Chicago, and Orlando for the WCOF drafts. Again, we have Dustin Ashby on the phone. He's the co-owner of the World Championships of Fantasy Football. So now we are here to pick Dustin's brain and find out what he is seeing in some of the preseason drafts. With the main event, they have drafts leading up to the main event for the World Championships of Fantasy Football. Dustin, some of these are satellites that people can buy into for smaller amounts so that they can win next year a seat into the main event. So you see drafts there, and then you also see some other online championship drafts that are going on. If we could, we'd love to pick your brain and find out what our viewers out there can expect in these drafts that they're going to be doing in the weeks to come, so they know who to take and maybe some of the players that they can wait a little bit longer in drafting in their drafts at home. We can start right at the top. I mean, the top three players are pretty straightforward, but how are you seeing the rest of the first rounds playing out thus far? Are you seeing there's a lot of philosophy now that you start taking stud receivers earlier and more often? Because the running back by committee is just like sort of overwhelming the NFL, and it's making fantasy football very frustrating for a lot of owners.
It really has. I mean, right now you've got 4 or 5 premier backs that you can count on. At the top of that, that draft board, of course, in Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson, Maurice Jones-Drew. I think Frank Gore you can consider up there as well. But Ray Rice has been the guy. He's been the darling right now early on in these satellite leagues. He's been going, at times as early as even 2 and no later than 5 on the draft board. We have seen a trend to go and get those stud receivers early. Now, with the injury of Larry Fitzgerald, as of the last several days, we have seen a shift in that strategy a little bit. We're not seeing Fitzgerald jump off the draft board in that first round. Up to that point, it was always Andre Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Reggie Wayne. Of course, Randy Moss is always right there still, too.
Sure.
But you're seeing receivers go late in the first round. You're seeing teams that have that in a serpentine draft, that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pick really emphasize the receivers with their first 2 selections, which what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of value in running backs there to be found then in rounds 3 through 5. I mean, you're getting guys like Sean Green, you're getting guys like Pierre Thomas, you're getting some pretty good running backs later on in those 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. So it's been fun to watch these early satellite leagues go off and follow these trends.
Okay, Dustin, there's been a lot of intrigue surrounding the Minnesota Vikings this year, obviously with Brett Favre retiring and then unretiring. A big question mark that not a lot of people, a guy that really stepped up last season is Sidney Rice. And there's a lot of intrigue surrounding Sidney Rice with his hip and also with Brett Favre retiring now coming back to the team, because he caught 88 balls last year in great fashion. No one really saw where this guy came from, really. And take us through where Sidney Rice is jumping off on the draft boards.
He's a one-year wonder.
He's a talent, though, and he really is. He has loads of talent. The issue there is going to be, I guess, a couple things. One, the Vikings schedule last year, if you remember, those first 4 or 5 weeks, I think you or I could have been quarterback, and they would have won at least 4 of those games. I mean, let's be real. So they didn't have difficult matchups early in the season. Now, the injury that Sidney has is not an injury you like to see in a wide receiver because, look, he's just one bad hit away from being hurt and being out several weeks. And you don't want somebody going off the draft board right around 2-8, 2-9 on the draft to be out for a couple of weeks. And that being said, then you have Brett Favre. Even Brett Favre yesterday said, look, don't expect me to repeat 2009, and I don't think anybody is. So all those things considered, Sidney Rice, he's going right now, again, middle, late second round. I don't see how he can outperform that draft position. And when you're trying to win a draft, you're looking for value. And right now, I don't think you see value in Sidney Rice.
Right. Now, last season, we saw a guy, Jamal Charles, of the Kansas City Chiefs running back, had a great second half. Led all fantasy running backs in second half rushing. Talk me through Jamal Charles. I mean, they get Dexter McCluster out of Ole Miss. He's sort of like their hybrid. And then you also have Thomas Jones. Throw him into the mix in Todd Haley's offense. How do you see Jamal Charles?
Sounds like a running back by committee to me.
That's a scary one for fantasy owners. It really is, because Jamal Charles, what he did late in the season last year, I mean, no one had done that. I mean,
it's unbelievable.
It was record-breaking. He really proved that he could carry the load. Now the question is can he carry the load the entire season? And that's a big question for fantasy owners right now. Thomas Jones, look, he's had 1,000 yards rushing for the last 4 years. It's hard to forget that. And now, while he did do it behind a very good New York Jets offensive line, he's not going to have that same offensive line in Kansas City. He still is a threat to get some carries away from Jamal Charles. Now, I think what you're seeing in the preseason is Todd Haley playing games with Jamal Charles. As a result, there's some question marks around who's going to get those carries. Jamal Charles is going to be the guy to start the season, in my opinion, if not early on the season. But now, is he going to be a guy you want to draft late in the second round? That's the big question.
Right.
Heavens no. But I'm not giving away any of my draft tips here. We have a couple minutes left here, Dustin. Let's try to pick your brain on who are some of the guys that they're falling down a little bit further. I know you mentioned running backs were falling down the draft boards a little bit. If you could give us, say, 3 or 4 guys that you think that the viewers out there could maybe sit an extra round or 2 on that they can get as a good value pick, and then we'll go to your guys that are getting overdrafted here in just a minute as well.
Well, sure. I think guys to look out for. I think the tight end trend this year is very interesting. There are so many tight ends. It's a very deep class of tight ends. And, of course, it starts with your Dallas Clarks and Jason Wittens. But don't forget about a guy like Zach Miller in Oakland right now. You got Jason Campbell coming out to Oakland. Jason Campbell used both his tight ends in Washington extremely well, and Fred Davis and Chris Cooley.
That's right.
Zach Miller's the guy right now you can get in the 9th round in your draft. I don't think you're going to see a huge drop-off from Zach Miller versus somebody you have to get in rounds 5 or 6. So focus on your running back and receiver, even your quarterback there in round 6 and 7, and look for Zach Miller late in round 9. And then Mike Wallace, receiver out of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Antonio Holmes is gone.
That's right.
Mike Wallace is the guy you can expect to have that breakout season in 2010.
And unfortunately, we have to wait a couple games on Big Ben to get back in that lineup there. But, hey, Dustin, we got about 30 seconds left, so I just wanted to take another minute here and just thank you so much for coming on the show, telling our viewers about the World Championships of Fantasy Football. It is such a great contest. I hope that everybody eventually gets a chance to play in that competition. It's just something else. It's a really well-run organization, and you're competing against the best of the best in fantasy football. And if you win that title, I mean, you just got the bragging rights for life. It's just so exciting. So, Dustin, thanks again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. You've been a tremendous guest.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll definitely look forward to talking to you again in the future, man. But good luck with WCOF and your drafts in Vegas. I hope that you sell out all your leagues, man. And we got to get going here. Dustin, thanks for coming on the show. Robbie, good to see you again. And we will see all you guys next week on Fantasy Sports Review. Goodbye, everybody.